So Horrid Henry is one of those iconic British series that for what it's worth seems to have stood the test of time and spanned multiple generations of kids. Like, I'm nearly 30 and Horrid Henry was popular during my primary school years. And even now in the 2020s I still sometimes see tweets or YouTube videos popping up, often about the show, discussing how Henry is a victim of child abuse or how much of a nasty cow Henry's mother is. Often from people who I assume were in nappies when I was in high school. And it makes sense. The show was still airing new episodes well into 2019, and as said, it still maintains a lot of popularity today. So, as you can guess, Horrid Henry, for me, holds a special place in my childhood. When I was a young lad, I was a massive, and I mean a massive fan of the books. I'd always ask my mother to get me whatever new book came out, and any books I was missing in my collection, I always wanted. And when I did get a new Horrid Henry book, I'd read it at least 5 times over in that same week and still be enthralled by it. And like many kids do, I'd find myself drawing fan art and writing short stories and whatnot. So on that one fateful day in 2006 when I heard about a Horrid Henry TV show airing, well, it was a wish of mine that came true, and I made damn sure I caught that first Halloween episode when it aired on CITV. And I remember that moment very fondly, as did my friends at school at the time who were also heavily into the series. But even though I was a fan of the Horrid Henry books and the TV show, there was still one thing from the series that I thought was missing. And that of course is games. Like many young boys, and a few girls as well I'd imagine, but I was heavily into gaming, and for what it's worth, quite a few TV shows that I watched did have their own games. Some of these I played, some of these I didn't, but it was like say The Simpsons Hit and Run, Ed, Edd n Eddy The Misadventures, SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom, The Fairly Odd Parents and so on. I wanted some Horrid Henry games, but there weren't any. So I ended up settling for making Henry and probably quite a few other characters in games like say Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, WWE and probably FIFA. Now naturally, as most people tend to do, I kind of grew out of being a Horrid Henry fan around, I'd say I was about 11 or so. That's when I just stopped being a fan. I stopped reading the new books and I stopped watching the show and moved on to other things. And it wasn't until a few years ago I did discover there were some Horrid Henry games that did actually release, many years after I stopped watching. So I think it's time for me to take a look at the majority of these and see if 8-year-old me would have loved them or not. So to start things off, we're going to play the oldest game first, and that is Horrid Henry Missions and Mischief on the DS. Now this game was also released on the Wii and PC, the PC version is lost, and the reason I'm sticking with the DS version is because, well, when I did have a Wii and DS, I spent more time playing that. Now one thing I liked from the get-go is the chiptune. I don't know if that's the right term or not, but I like the chiptune remix of the main theme. Anyway, I set my difficulty to Horrid because why not? And our first level is Horrid Halloween. I'm not sure if that's a nod to the show's first episode or not, but Henry's lost his spiders that he needs to trick or treat with, so we have to find Peter. In 25 seconds. Now I failed this outright. Level 1 on a Horrid Henry game. I was genuinely not expecting such a tight timer on the first level of all things. Anyway, as you can see, the game is set in a 2D side scroller. One thing I'm really surprised about the level design of this is how they managed to elongate Henry's home so much for this. The only enemies we seem to find around the house are just like spiders and robots, and it kind of feels like they're only here for the sake of being here. Anyway, thankfully we find Peter with only 9 seconds to spare, and we find out he's dropped his sweets all around the house. And now we have 15 minutes to find them. Just to reiterate, 15 minutes. That is a much more generous time limit than the 30-second limit we got on level 1. Like, why is level 1's time limit so tight? Like, the time limit on level 1 is like Peter's about to launch a nuclear strike on Russia and we need to stop him. And level 2's limit is just like go for a casual stroll around the area, it's nice weather outside, come back and we've still got about 20 minutes to spare. And unsurprisingly we find all the sweets in less than 3 minutes. So level 3 has Dad coming in furious at Henry's spiders all over the place, and demands he gets rid of them. And here we're introduced to the combat, which is goo, and we have to destroy all the spiders. Basically, the entire game feels like it's a possible plot for an episode split up into multiple single objective levels. Like in this case, Halloween, Henry's ready for pranks, but his spider's gone missing, Peter's lost his sweets and Henry tries extorting him for a share, which is pretty much what you'd expect to see in an episode. And this is sort of followed by the second level, where it appears Moody Margaret has raided Henry's kitchen for some biscuits, and Henry launches his own counterattack. Again, a similar plotline to what you'd expect to see in a book or the show. Now the downside is, the game is very repetitive I find. The objectives seem to be really similar in that way. Here's a time limit, which is very generous by the way. Go and find these objectives, or destroy some enemies, and you're done. There's no real variety or difficulty I find. and there's no background music either, it's just the same looping track over and over again. Although to be fair on the difficulty again, as said I am pushing 30 as I'm making this, so I'm probably not the target audience, and if I played this when I was younger, I probably would have struggled a lot more, and would have found it much harder of course. Overall, I wouldn't say this game is very bad. It's probably something a young child and a strong Horrid Henry fan, for example me if I played this when I was about 7 or so, would have absolutely played the living hell out of. For that I'd rate it somewhere in the middle. I feel like you have to be a strong Horrid Henry fan to enjoy this game way more than say a casual fan would. Now before we cover this next game, don't worry there's no sponsors, but let's take a quick moment to remember what Horrid Henry is all about. Horrid Henry is a slice of life series. Now, slice of life is used as a term to portray a more realistic depiction of life and events intended for their target audience, often in a grounded and more realistic setting. Sometimes it can be a bit exaggerated for comedic or dramatic effect, but ultimately, it tries to stay very close to realistic themes and tones. Other British examples of slice of life are like The In-Betweeners, Fresh Meat, and maybe you can stretch the definition to shows like Shameless or Peep Show as well. I know I've only listed off Channel 4 shows there, but that's because Channel 4 probably does them best. But anyway, in Horrid Henry's case, it was a slice of life for what life was like for British boys. Stuff about school, family life, rivalries with, say, a classmate or a sibling, nasty teachers, Christmas, chores, sports day. You're not going on any big adventures to save the world or getting superpowers. The reason I bring that up is because Horrid Henry's Horrid Adventures really strives far away from the themes of the show as it possibly can get. So, the plot is, Horrid Henry wakes up and finds out everything except the rug on the floor and some tables has been stolen by Moody Margaret. He immediately sets off to chase her, noticing she's also stolen his purple hand flag. Now while chasing, Margaret seems to drop something, and Henry picks it up and has Brainy Brian deduct it, and it turns out it's a map of the evil empire from Gross Class Zero. Now all of this is even conveyed with illustrations too. Now on paper this is perfect, a fantastic intro. Again, it seems very in line for what we see with the show. But that's pretty much where it ends, because for some reason, when Henry says the rhyme, he's sucked into the map, and he's kind of trapped in the evil empire from Gross Class Zero. And this is where the plot makes no sense, because you're kind of thrown straight into the game, and is Henry trying to escape the evil empire, or is he trying to get his flag back, or what? And even during the levels as well, like after the first boss, like with many games you get a cutscene, or in this case, illustration scene, and it's heavily implied that Henry and Margaret are fighting in the park or something. Now I know this is a children's game so we shouldn't look too much into this, but it's not really elaborated on if this is taking place in their imaginations or not, because in the same scene Henry picks up another map and he's teleported to Lovely Land with the help of Perfect Peter. And the plot is really weird in that way. Like I feel a plot theme like this works well if it's done in a way similar to that one episode from Ed, Edd n Eddy. I can't remember the exact episode name, but it's the one where the Eds want to see a movie but they can't because they're too young. So their imaginations run wild in the junkyard, and it kind of delves them into running loose thinking the junkyard is another planet, before an abrupt stop when Sarah calls them for dinner. So is Henry actually being teleported to these places, or is it just imagination? So yeah, the story makes absolutely no sense in this way. Hardly expecting the storytelling of Project Hail Mary here, but come on. Now I know I've yapped on way too much about the story here, but for the gameplay, surprisingly, I thought it was quite entertaining for what it's worth, and I definitely would have played through this to the end if I played this when I was much younger. It's way more enjoyable, way more engaging than Missions and Mischief, and the levels also have you skating for yo-yos if you want to give yourself a bit of a completionist aspect as well. Difficulty is just about right for its target audience, I find. But another problem is the game's on the shorter side. You can easily beat this game in less than an hour even on a casual playthrough. So overall I'm quite mixed on it. The gameplay is quite solid and quite fun, you've also got good upgrades. The story is what drags it down considerably, and same for the length, so I don't really know what to make of it. Again, I'm going to leave this on mixed. Now before we cover this next game, don't worry there's no sponsors, but let's take a quick moment to remember. Hang on a minute, I'm pretty sure we said this just. Yeah we did. So yeah, as you can guess from that, The Good, the Bad, the Bugly is in similar style to Horrid Adventures, but unlike Horrid Adventures, this game has absolutely nothing to do with the show at all, except the intro scene. And of course the Horrid Henry branding. So the plot to Horrid Henry, The Good, the Bad and the Bugly is Peter has lost his beloved teddy bear, which again sounds like a plot for an episode. But after the first kind of cutscene. It has Henry teleporting to some mystical fantasy land, he's fighting off mushrooms, collecting cookies like Crash Bandicoot does Wumpa Fruit, and he's fighting rabbits and squid monsters. Now I know the show has some outlandish moments, but nothing like this I remember. Now unlike Horrid Adventures of course, which did have like an overarching plot of Henry being raided and also had loads of characters from the show making appearances, here we don't. There are no appearances from any other character. There's no Rude Ralph, there's no Mum and Dad, well, you don't see them in person, I believe you hear Mum and Dad in the cutscenes. There's no Miss Battleaxe, and even though Moody Margaret appears on the cover, she only makes an appearance as a gorilla. The only one who kind of appears is Fang, who's a giant now, or Henry Shrunk, one of the two. There's also no scenery from the show here at all. Again, at least Horrid Adventures kind of tied into that aspect. You had Gross Class Zero, which is one of Henry's favourite shows. But as said, no scenery here at all. There's no house, there's no level set inside the school, or even outside the house or anything like it. The only time we get to see the house is just in the really short cutscenes. This comment's 100% accurate. And also, yes, if you are wondering, I played about 2 levels of this and I found the game extremely boring and repetitive. Then I just went and watched the rest of it on YouTube. And aside from the scenery background changes, it does seem to be the exact same game from beginning to end. Hardly something like say Super Mario Bros, where you know the further you progress you get new enemies, new power-ups and new gameplay mechanics or whatever to keep you, the player, invested in this game. This is probably one of the worst examples of an adaptation I've ever seen. This kind of thing honestly stinks, so whoever owns the rights to Horrid Henry just sold them off to some crappy developer who assumes Horrid Henry branding and imagery just means it'll be an instant hit amongst the fans who will buy anything up with his face on it, and then get treated, well you can't even say the word treated, because this is not a treat, it's more of a punishment. So I'll say you receive a product that has nothing to do with the franchise you enjoy. Not to sound too dramatic here, but this has to be a strong contender for one of the shittiest games I have ever played in my life. It completely spits on my childhood. Well, the good parts of my childhood anyway. Also, according to this comment, this so-called Horrid Henry game isn't even a Horrid Henry game, it's a palette swap, if that's the right term. It's of a completely different game called Hugo Magic in the Troll Woods. So, I looked at some gameplay of it, and it is.
Those coins are the lost treasure of the troll people. If I collect the coins, then the elders will reward me with something from their armory.
All they did was swap out Hugo for Henry and called it a day. They really went all out in making a quality game. This game is absolute dog shit. Stay the fuck away from drugs and stay the fuck away from this. So now we have Horrid Henry's Krazy Karts, which is available on Switch and PC, and thankfully by going off the art alone, this looks infinitely more true to the show than that piece of crap Bugly on the 3DS. Also, another bonus point to this already is it's a kart racer, which is one of my personal favourite genres of gaming. Aside from the obvious Mario Kart, I've always liked many kart races in the past. Even as a young lad I used to like Crash Team Racing and Crash Nitro Kart, and even when Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled made its way to PS4, I played the absolute hell out of that, and was actually pretty good at it. I was ranked, I think is in the top 100 on one of the world record time trials. And also other games like say Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed. Unfortunately, judging from the screenshots, it appears that this is not going to be anything like Crash Team Racing, Mario Kart or Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed. But the good news is, compared to that Bugly game, this one looks like a masterpiece in comparison and we haven't even played it yet. We've got a game that's actually going back to the theme of the show. We have the music, we have the scenery, or well, most of the scenery, and the cast of the characters in the show, a massive step up. The game itself, well, in single player mode you can only play as Henry during the cups. When you start the game we have a tutorial from Brainy Brian who gives us a rundown of the gameplay and we're thrown into the cup straight after. Now I swear I have played something like this before back in the Newground days. I can't quite put my finger on it, but this game just feels really familiar. It feels like the kind of game that I would have played back on the school computers in like say 2007. Now the game itself is also lacking quite hard in the kart racer department, and what I mean by that is, well, let me explain. First of all, let's talk about unlockables. You see, in most kart races you only have a tiny amount of tracks and characters to start off with, which gradually open up as you play more. And in the cups mode it's fine because all the cups are locked. But the thing is, if you go for a casual race, every track is already here, unlocked from the get-go. There's really no reason to play through this at all because of that. The tracks seem to be the exact same on every cup too, just a slightly different layout. We have Ashton, School, Park and Gross World. There's really not much variety here. This is also the only mode where you can actually choose who you want to play as, and we only have 6 characters, which is extremely low. One of the things I absolutely loved about the Horrid Henry books and the TV show was the wide range of characters it had. You could easily add, say, Sour Susan, Aerobic Al, Beefy Bert, Stuck Up Steve, Great Aunt Greta, Henry's parents, Peter's Best Boy Club. Those are just some characters I've named off the top of my head, and I can't even remember the last time I even watched an episode, or even read one of the books. But you get the point. There's so many characters you could have added to this, but there just doesn't seem to be any. You went with these 6. But other than that though, since this is a kart racer, you play one race, you kind of get an idea what the rest of the game is going to be like. And because of that, again, the game suffers from what I feel is just repetitiveness. And unlike games like, say, Mario Kart or Crash Team Racing, you don't have any kind of tactics, if that makes sense. You know, you don't have to learn how to power boost or find shortcuts or whatnot. It's just kind of play and go, if that's the right way to describe it. The only kind of unique thing for this game is these special abilities. Like, depending on who you play as, you get this kind of gauge that fills up, and when you fill it up you can just activate some special ability which will usually plunge you into first. And I will give the game credit for one thing. Peter's special ability is straight up him flying into first. Even in the games he's a fucking knob. Now overall, this game is probably meh. Overall, this game, I don't know, I'm going to say slightly negative for a few things. One, the fact that this game is a tenner. A tenner for a game like this is just extortionate. Like in 2022, I bought Yakuza 0 for about, I think it's about £3 or so, and I got 60 hours out of that. In 2019, I paid about 12 quid for Hearts of Iron 4, and I don't even want to know how many hours of my life I've wasted in that. The point being is, you know, a game like this is not worth a tenner. If it was a free flash game, or, you know, maybe 1 or 2 quid, maybe a bit more forgivable, but the price is just extortionate. But I guess to a Horrid Henry fan and to a very young child, and I mean a young child, like probably about 5 or so, this game's probably fine for them. They'll probably get a lot more enjoyment out of this than, say, even an 8-year-old probably would, because, well, as I said, the game really doesn't have much to offer. I feel like if I was to play this game as a young lad, I still probably wouldn't like it much either. Probably the kind of game that I'd be excited for because it's a Horrid Henry kart racer, play it for 5 minutes and then think, yeah, this is not exactly Crash Nitro Kart, then probably go back to that instead. So yeah, definitely better than Bugly, but let's be honest, the bar was set so low in the dirt, even ants are crawling over it. So yeah, I'm going to rate this on the more negative side. But it's safe to say that Horrid Henry's games are probably the definition of meh. Like, they really aren't anything special at all. Now, while The Simpsons and SpongeBob had their own fair share of some absolute stinkers back in the PS2 era, even they had some gems here and there. But the thing with Horrid Henry's games is, they're also, well, the majority of them are not outright terrible either, outside the Bugly one. I think if I was much younger, the majority of these would have been passable. Like, the games I would play just because they're Horrid Henry. And then again, that's the target audience, so it would have worked on me anyway. It's kind of like when I was younger, as I said, I used to want a Horrid Henry game in a similar style to, say, Hit and Run and Battle for Bikini Bottom. You know, go and run around an open world and explore various places from the show, and have a world crafted so well you can tell it was made by people with such a strong grasp on the show's identity. But unfortunately, it seems that ship has sailed long ago, and even Horrid Henry itself seems to be mostly done for. Now, according to Wikipedia, because as I said I don't follow the show or the books anymore, the Krazy Karts thing was the last official thing to release, with of course that being a game that released in 2022, and the last book came out in 2019 and the TV series ended with some specials in 2020. But at least the books and the shows were absolute quality though. So that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching and have a great day. Let me know what you think of these down below.